we typically don't have that same sort of messaging with men, you know?
Yeah.
And it's sort of frustrating and interesting. As a man, you don't know. I'll say it like this: as women, it's not uncommon, or it's not deemed as not okay for women to go to the bathroom together, or to help each other with their bras or with their periods, or
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
type of conversations. And
Mm-hmm.
as a man or as a boy, even when you're little growing up, there's so many things that just aren't okay to talk about or explore, or you know what I'm saying, to even behind closed doors have conversations with your friends. It's like so many things are taboo.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
okay, girls get the opportunity to really explore the feelings of situations, whereas boys are unwittingly expected to know everything, and because they think they're supposed to know, they don't feel like they can ask, and then that's a chip
Mm-hmm.
that grows on your shoulder, because you can't ask, because you can't not look like you don't know. And now this cycle of
Ignorance.
toxic male ego and uncomfortableness around oneself, one's body, and how to use it all begin to like roll and spiral and
Yeah.
develop and
Yeah.
snowball.
And I I see it. I see it every day. You
Yeah.
know, so I think that part of it is like we have to have talks with dudes, and dude adjacents and anyone who has a penis or grew up with a penis. Like we all need to have these conversations, and it's partly like we all have to do our part, right? So I can start the conversation with, for example, my nephews, who I talk to about sex all the time, right? I've asked my oldest nephew, who's 17, like maybe 20 times this year if he still remembers how to put on a condom correctly. And I ask him how's his development going and if he wants to talk about anything that has to do with exploring his body. Right. And it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to grab at having the conversation, but it normalizes that they can have the conversation, that
Right.
it's okay to bring this topic up for discussion. Um, and I've seen the impact of that in how, body positive my nephew is and how he's just loving himself, even as he's like growing and his body's shifting and like his voice is deepening and like all of these changes are going on. Um, I'm so proud to say like he is loving himself throughout this process. And I know I didn't. Not the way I'm witnessing the next generation. And I think that's the best we can do, is like generation by generation create a shift that will eventually lead to a society that is fully embracing, celebrating everybody for their bodies exactly how they are.
So here's I guess, maybe sort of a controversial question. When you talk about uh, loving your body and loving it exactly how you are,
Mm-hmm.
and on the other side of that coin, you look at people who are or want to transition, how does that sort of uh, doesn't match up to a
It
degree?
does.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
It does and it doesn't, right? I think that for someone who is transitioning, right, there is a disconnection, right, of who they are and what physically is present.
Okay.
And we are our own masterpieces. You, as an individual, know, and your body knows exactly who you are, the perfect size, the perfect shape, the perfect everything, right? The perfect composition of who you are to be vibrating at 100% authenticity. And what I see part of our journey here is removing all the shit that gets dumped on us that is moved us away from that 100% authenticity. So for some people, that is going to look like I am going to completely transition. Right? For some people, that means I am going to explore the gray and figure out something that's no one else's but mine. Right? Like I was using the word fluid when people were like, "You're what?" Fluid? I don't know what that even fucking means, was what people were telling me.
Right.
And I would have to explain what it meant to me. And it wasn't based on a textbook definition. It was based on like, this is how Dienez expresses, and I like people. And now the word is pansexual. For the very same thing that I was talking about 15 years ago, but I was calling it fluid because that's the language I had access to.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that there's a way in which we are just trying to get back into alignment. And like when we actually tune in, tap in, and listen to our bodies, our soul, then we can actually make adjustments. And it doesn't mean that you don't love what's there now or what was then. It's just you're getting back in alignment. So I lost 70 pounds without trying.
Wow.
It just dropped off my body over the course, I'd say 6 months. Always struggled with weight. Always was a little thicker on the sides. You know, like I had meat. And not to the point where someone would call me like morbidly or obese or whatever medically, but I always came out as like obese on like the BMI thing.
Yep.
Psychologically, what that does to someone, it has an impact, right? To be called obese. I don't think that's body positive language. I think socially we need to shift that shit. When I lost the weight, I didn't even know how to react to the weight loss. Because some people were like, oh my God, you look great. Some people were like, oh my God, you look like you have AIDS. And like, here I am just trying to figure out why the fuck I lost 70 pounds in 6 months.
And it wasn't like you didn't change your diet, you weren't exercising different, just...
I had changed a little bit of my diet, but not in any drastic way that I hadn't done it before to get such a drastic result. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So it was like, well, slow down, tune in, tap in, and what is my body saying to me? Mm-hmm. And my body was like, we let some excess weight that we no longer need go.
Right. Speaking of go, we're going to take a quick commercial break. you're going to hear a quick word from our sponsors. So, welcome back. We're back from our break, and we've been having a great conversation with Dieniz. Tell us a little bit about some of the cool hidden perks of what you do.
The hidden perks of what I do. Okay. I think that, first of all, I am so blessed to get to do something that I love to do, to get to be of service in the way that I am in this world. So, first of all, let me just say that before I say I get to work from home. Like, I know a lot of people right now are like, oh my God, we're transitioning to online therapy or like online this or online that. And I'm like, I've been online for 10 years, y'all. So this is just like smooth transition for me because there's no transition, right? I've been online this whole time. So I think that's a huge perk. I think part of the perks are getting to be an educator. I think a lot of time in my specialty within counseling, therapy, life coaching, whatever you want to call it, that I do, is that you get to educate people about their bodies and about sex and about like not just the mechanical things, but also the intellectual stuff that sometimes people don't think about. Like, are you sapiosexual? Maybe you need a little mental stimulation to get you going. And playing with people in that way, and that like, let me help like amp up your skill sets and like amp up your know-how, is really fun. Is really, really fun. And then getting to see people come home to themselves, like that moment where someone feels whole and you see that unfold in front of your eyes is magical. I love being able to bring a client back to knowing their power and their beauty and their brilliance. And then like, years down the line, like I have a client that I worked with for a long time, ongoing. And, she has the perfect relationship that works for her, and she's like super happy, and they've been together for a year. And this is after having been single, like nothing, like no boyfriend, sex partner, nothing for 15 years. Right. And it's like to see such a stark, like, change in someone's life of having like literally energetic blockage to love that doesn't allow them to have anything for 15 years. And then all of a sudden in the course of like 2-3 years, they've had all the lovers they've wanted. They've found the perfect partner. They have just come fully into their power in so many different areas of their life. To see that now from afar, where I don't have to be doing anything to make that blossom, that's beautiful. That's where it's like I did my job well.
Yeah, I mean that's clearing all the cobwebs. That's relaying some new pipe. That's
Yeah.
adding some new water pressure pumps and some filters. That's a whole lot. Like,
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I like to really be clear with people, and especially my clients, but even if you're just asking me about my work, it's like I believe in tilling the soil and uprooting all the weeds and really getting the right pH in your soil so that once you do plant something in there, it is gonna fucking blossom.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is no other option but it to blossom in that soil. But a lot of the time we try all this superficial shit, not getting down to the roots. We got dry ass soil trying to plant some produce, and then we wonder why nothing growing.
It ain't wet. You gotta moisten it up. It's gotta be moist.
Gotta till it.
Gotta till it. It's gotta be moist if you're gonna till it.
Mm-hmm.
Can't till that soil dry.
So come get some water. I got water for days.
pH fresh.
Yep, alkaline. I keep it alkaline.
Alkaline.
Yes, I do. I always drink alkaline water.
Really?
It's so good for you.
So how does this work like affected your personal life and your sex life? Like, what has it done for that?
I think a lot of people find me interesting. But at the same time, a lot of people find me intimidating. Right? So it takes a certain type of player, you know, like playing in the game of life player.
Right.
To be able to like meet me there, to meet me where I'm at, and without feeling insecure or like intimidated or, you know, any of those things. But it just allows a lot more transparency, I think, in relationship for me, where I can just be honest of like, today my clit's not feeling anything. You know, it's like, it's not you, it's my clit. I don't know what's happening. Let's move on. No, right?
Today it worked fine. Yesterday, last week, well, I still remember last week, but today, nothing.
Exactly. And to have this level of honesty and humor, right, to sex, I think also where it's like, ooh, you know, I couldn't climax because I had to fart. And it's like, great, why didn't you just let it rip? Right. That's what I would say. But I think that there's a lot of like other intimacy that comes with sex when you're not so cookie cutter. Like it has to look and be presented in this beautiful platter. Like I don't mind the messiness of sexuality and sex within all of it. And I welcome it in many ways. Yeah, so I think if anything, I'm just like more accepting and open-minded. But I don't believe that I'm any more open-minded than we all have the potential to be. Yeah.
So with that said, you're queer.
I identify as queer. Yes, queer.
So explain to us the difference between bisexual and queer, and like what the I guess variations of that.
Yeah, I think there's really the biggest distinctions are queer is an umbrella term, bisexual is not, right? Queer is a reclaimed term. I think bisexual, we're still trying. And there's a lot of stigma around bisexuality. I think personally, because for me, I knew very early on that it had zero to do with someone's gender or their genitalia. whether or not I was attracted to them, I prefer queer, because queer is more about identity. It's more about community. It's more about the collective in many ways. Whereas bisexuality, or the term bisexual, is very much like you like men and you like women, you like penises and you like vaginas, and that's all you like. And the misconception that you like them at the same time, and that you're greedy, and that you are confused and you just don't know what you want. Right? Like that is like the biggest misconception of bisexuality. And on the flip side, with the word queer, it was used against people who were of the LGBTQIA community. Very similarly to the way, spic was used against the Latinx community. And yeah, there's just something about the term that resonates for me. Having the identity of Latinx, coming from growing up being called Hispanic, and like also kind of doing a reappropriation in that identity of like, I'm not Hispanic, I'm Latinx. I'm not, bi, I'm fluid. And then from fluid going into I'm queer, just felt right for me. And it's because it doesn't have to do with gender. It doesn't have to do with anything other than like the person's soul and how they embody life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you embody life in such a way that it makes me feel alive, guess what? I might find you attractive. I might want to be intimate with you in
Right.
some capacity.
So queer comes off as the lifestyle, the thought provocative, sort of very nuanced,
Mm-hmm.
detailed term, and bi is the party. What is it tonight? Sort of term.
I mean, I think bi is
So
a
I was
very
thinking
mainstream term.
like a bar term almost.
Yeah.
You know,
I think,
you and your bestie at the bar look across the room and say who's hot, him, her, them.
mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Well, and I think like I know a lot of people who identify as bisexual, and there's definitely a lot of intricacies to that identity as well. So I'm not knocking the identity. I think that there is still a lot for us to unravel culturally around identity, specifically the bi identity, even within the queer community, right? Because part of it is, when you're in an oppressed community and you witness privilege within some of that, it becomes really hard to not call it out and not, in some ways, be jelly, right? Like there's just like ways of humanity interacting that it just happens. Like it's like if you transition from female to male, you will have male privilege.
You think?
I know, because people who I've witnessed transition have mentioned it, if they're aware, right, of their privileges before and after. You can see it, you can feel it, right? Like going out with someone who was a woman once and now has transitioned to a man, I feel the difference.
How so? It's funny.
The way that they're addressed, the level of respect that they get, the amount of airspace that they get, it changes, right?
So when they transitioned to a male, they were given more space and more.
Yeah, more respect, questioned less in many regards. Like, you just get certain male privileges. And I would say it's the same when the opposite. Like, even within the trans community, there's a lot of, you know, strife at times, right? Because it's like this person who has transitioned now has more of a voice than they did before. Nothing has changed about their message except their gender, or like a specific label of identity that they have, right? So I think that we also have to be aware that there is like an intersecting of like treatment and privilege in this world and how our bodies are perceived, whether it's on a gender or like masculine, feminine look. um, that causes issues internally within community. And we don't want to talk about it because it's hard. It's hard to say, I think you would not be heard the same way if you weren't trans. Or that if you were a man, your message would be lost. Or because you're a man, people are listening versus I've been saying the same thing for 5 years and they're not listening. Right? So like, and this is where we get these like gender animosities and like group and micro aggressions happening internally, that inhibits us from growing together, and it limits us from doing the deeper work together to like shift the collective beyond just our community.
Right. Because I think that's an interesting point you make, because I would think um, people whom identify as women or look as women, I feel are given more leeway in regards to what they can do in society and what's acceptable for them to do in society versus gay men, I think, have it a little bit tougher in regards to visibility. What is acceptable to see of a gay man versus
Gay men versus gay women. I would agree.
so.
And I would even say that it's the same thing with straight men and straight women,
Mm,
right? Like a woman exploring, making out at a bar with her best friends is not an issue. It's like, oh, she had a drunk moment,
right,
right? For example, or like, ooh, that was a dumb moment, right? Whatever. Even if you're not drinking, there you'll find like just some like way of like minimizing it and dismissing it.
right,
Whereas if a man was to do the same thing, a hetero man, he's instantly questioned for his orientation and his sexuality and the validity of his identity as hetero.
right. Which is what makes it interesting, because when you talk about someone transitioning the other way and seeing the privileges, it's like,
But then even, and this is a topic that I've semi discussed on a Facebook post, is, trans women have a lot more voice
mm-hmm,
than hetero women who have the same message at times.
interesting.
Right. And it's partly because of the days that we're living in, right? It's partly because, yes, they are getting murdered exponentially more than we are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yes, that is so true. And we need to continue to elevate the voices of trans women so that they stop being the victims of violence in this country. And there is still room to look at why is it that their voices are being heard or listened to more at times, or like sometimes not even listened to, just like
They're just gonna cut through.
elevated. And I think that also in some ways there's like a fetish of our community, like a fetishizing of our community, that is like, okay, because you are of this community, like we're gonna look, but it's almost look but not listen.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? It's almost like a pompous show. It's like we're elevating your voice and we're putting you up on these platforms and we're doing all this thing, and like cis women are like, what the fuck? I've been saying the same shit for all this time. And then there's animosity there between the cis women and the trans women. And I'm over here like, y'all, we're all getting played. Right? Like, we're not even being listened to. Like, this is all just a show, a horse and pony show. And like, it doesn't matter who the fucking pony is. Like, we're a fucking pony.
Right. You know what I'm saying? We all ponies lined up in the same race. People feel.
Whereas I think if we were to be having these conversations of like, despite certain voices being elevated, how can we make sure that we are being listened to and that we are unified, regardless of whether it's a trans woman at the front line or a cis woman or a gay man or a trans man or whatever identity, that simply because the message is the truth, that's why we're backing it.
Right.
And not because of all of the aesthetics and the boxes and the marketing checklist that it meets for our agenda.